Hi, everyone.
Hello again. We're in the Pure Worship book. We're dealing with the matter on pages 92 to 94. The subhead is, David, my servant, will be their chieftain forever. They leap over two chapters here, 35 and 36, to get to 37. I think they're going to get to 36 later. We've seen the pattern is always jumping around.
Yeah.
Maybe the connection for them here is that David is referenced in chapter 34 and he's referenced again in chapter 37, which is the only chapter they want us to read, and then only 5 verses.
Yeah, the last 5 verses of the chapter.
So guess we can read the 5 verses first and see what they want us to see, and maybe there's some problems right in that. But then we'll read the context to see what they've left out of this chapter that might be significant.
Because they do reference more verses, but they don't
Want you to read them.
Yeah, they don't say read them, and they select out of them just terms and phrases. Okay, so 24 to 28 is what they asked you to read in chapter 37 of Ezekiel. My servant David will be their king, and they will all have one shepherd. They will walk in my judicial decisions and carefully observe my statutes. They will dwell on the land that I gave to my servant, to Jacob, where your forefathers lived, and they will dwell on it forever, they and their children and their children's children. And David, my servant, will be their chieftain forever. And I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an eternal covenant with them. I will establish them and make them many, and place my sanctuary among them forever. My tent will be with them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And the nations will have to know that I, Jehovah, am sanctifying Israel when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. So I was reading from the Silver Sword, the Watchtower's Bible.
But even if you just had these 5 verses, what would you think is the subject matter here? The restoration of a people who once lived in a land are going to end up living in the land again.
Yeah, it gives specific names of people who lived, real people, and it gives specific location where they lived.
Particularly verse 25, they shall dwell in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, where your fathers lived.
Yeah.
3 times really it's referenced that this is the same land that was left. Why was it left? And that, of course, is not clear here, but will be when we read the rest. And the reference to they and their children and their children's children shall dwell there forever.
Yeah.
And David, my servant, will be their king or their prince. Well, if you think of it in terms of spiritual Israel or literal Israel, only a literal people on earth can have children and children of children.
Yeah.
And you have the saints, that is spiritual Israel as you think of them, are going to live in heaven forever because they're no longer earthly creatures. They're not human beings anymore. They're now spirit creatures, recreated, not resurrected.
In their literature, the verse that says, and place my sanctuary among them forever, they say sanctuary represents something.
Yeah.
What, pure worship, I think, is what they said? We can look in the text. But sanctuary was a building. It was a place. It was the place where God was worshipped. It was not representing something.
Yeah. So there's no reason at all to spiritualize any of this, but when you go to the paragraphs and you read them and you realize all of this is now being applied to the same stuff as the last chapter, which was 34, right?
They have how the prophecy is fulfilled, and then they immediately go to, in 1919, the faithful and anointed ones were united under their one shepherd. And then they bring in the great crowd in there. So they immediately go to their applications, the 2 sets of sheep.
Yeah. the modern history of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, this is why even the 5 verses that they do select for you to read have built-in problems. We just looked at about 3 of them.
Yeah.
But when you read the prior verses, the ones they reference but do not quote at all, except that they take a word and a phrase from it.
They reference in the very first paragraph, under the subheading, in brackets, they put Ezekiel 37:15-23.
Well, let's read them.
The suggestion is to, that this has something to do with it, but they don't quote it.
So you're going to read it again from the Silver Sword, right?
Yes. So 15, the word of Jehovah again came to me, saying, and you, son of man, take a stick and write on it, for Judah and for the people of Israel who are with him. Then take another stick and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel who are with him. Then bring them close to each other so that they become just one stick in your hand. When your people say to you, will you not tell us what these things mean? Tell them, this is what the sovereign Lord Jehovah says. I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel who are with him, and I will join them to the stick of Judah, and I will make them one stick, and they will become one in my hand. The sticks that you write on should be in your hand for them to see. Then tell them, this is what the sovereign Lord Jehovah says. I will take the Israelites from among the nations where they have gone, and I will collect them together from every direction and bring them to their land. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king will rule over all of them. And they will no longer be 2 nations, nor will they be divided any longer into 2 kingdoms. They will no longer defile themselves with their disgusting idols, and their detestable practices, and all their transgressions. I will save them from all their unfaithfulness, by which they have sinned, and I will cleanse them. They will be my people, and I myself will be their God.
So could it be more clear who the people are that he's regathering?
Yeah.
And will be the God of, ultimately.
Well,
it's the same people that have sinned. What's the verbs used? Backslidden, done detestable things, committed idolatry. In the ESV, it's
defiled
themselves with idols. Their transgressions he will not remember anymore. I will save them from all their backslidings.
They're called unfaithful in this translation.
So it's the same people that have sinned against Jehovah that he's ultimately going to rescue. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good reason why they don't want you to look closely and think much about these verses.
It makes the distinction of the Israelites from among the nations, the scattering of them.
Yeah.
So how are you going to get this to apply to the Watchtower? By just not reading it.
Yeah, and that's of course the pattern here in all of these chapters. They're jumping around even within the chapters so much you don't get your bearings very easily. What is this all about? Well, I think in the last couple of paragraphs here they lay it on you why they think that they are uniquely the people of God, and therefore, well, of course their leaders would be spiritual Israel. This cannot be about physical Israel. And they give you a bunch of reasons here that have nothing to do with the text, mind you. They have to do with New Testament texts.
So the paragraphs at 26, what can we learn from the prophecy? And then they reference 2 texts from 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 1 and 1 Corinthians 13. And they describe it this way. To that end, we eagerly feed on the same spiritual food, hold to the same scriptural standards of conduct, and share in the same vital work of kingdom preaching and disciple making. The real key to our unity, however, is love. As we strive to cultivate and display love in its many facets, including empathy, compassion, and forgiveness, we contribute to our unity. Love, the Bible says, is a perfect bond of union.
Problem with your proof texting here. Again, you don't quote what 1 Corinthians 1:10 says. Again, we've done video on that. I think we're going to connect one at the end.
Yeah.
If you look at those verses in 1 Corinthians 1, you realize it proves the very opposite of what you're insisting it proves. You think it proves that the unity was real in the first century? That means uniformity of belief?
He was counseling the Corinthians because they were divided. They were following. I follow Paul. I follow Cephas. Yeah.
Apollos?
That was his point, is that you're not behaving in unity. So real unity is even when you disagree, you still remain loving towards one another.
In a relationship. It doesn't depend on your agreement with each other. And that's been the case in Israel, because we could reference the Sanhedrin here. What does the Sanhedrin show you? Even if you just do a superficial reading of the Gospels and the book of Acts, you realize they're divided.
Yeah, they're arguing within...
The way the Jews think about it is, we can honor the true God, but disagree on a lot of things that aren't essential to our faith.
So, now I look at it and I think, why didn't I see this? That you've got... they talk about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but I kind of blocked them as one. But these were two different groups that had different beliefs, and that is obvious. That they, we knew the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection, and the Pharisees did. Well, how are these people getting along together and meeting together regularly?
Because some things are essential to be a Jew.
Yeah.
And some things are essential to be a Christian. But you don't have to agree on everything. So this sneaky transition to reference 1 Corinthians 1:10 and then go to the love chapter 13. What's wrong with that? Well, you're not defining love here. You're defining uniformity and therefore loyalty to an organization.
You're saying a forced agreement with one another, compassion for one another, and forgiveness for one another. If you disagree, you know what happens to you.
There you go. So compulsory uniformity is what you're talking about, not love. Love transcends the differences. And remember that famous saying of Paul, I think it's in Ephesians, putting up with one another in love.
Yeah.
Romans 14.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a favorite of mine.
I think they say something down here about what they think the theme of the book is.
Yeah, they say, let us remember that these messianic prophecies are part of an overall theme of restoration that is developed in the Bible book of Ezekiel. And then they say, Jehovah will collect together his people and restore pure worship among them. That phrase, pure worship, is not in the text at all.
Not biblical, nor is true religion. Even the word restoration, it's like the word resurrection, the way they use it. Resurrection to them isn't really resurrection, it's recreation.
Nothing's raised up.
Nothing's raised up. So restoration, what's being raised up that existed before? Well,
they're saying pure worship. So nothing is really restored. Because we read that they were guilty of all kinds of unfaithfulness. He's not restoring them to the way they were. He's making them into new people. That's part of the covenant. He is restoring
the theocracy of Israel on earth, though. That's what the references to David are all about. But in your case, Jehovah's Witnesses' case, you're not restoring anything. Your religion is a new thing.
Yeah,
that's why Christians regard witnesses as a cult, because it's a new religion. It has no correspondence in history, not in the Old Testament, not in the New Testament, and not in church history. Is there a body of people with your beliefs?
Yeah. So when it says Jehovah will collect together his people, that's who's being restored. The people to their land, to the kingdom promise.
Amen. What are our links?
We have true religion, ? Are Jehovah's Witnesses in the truth? What says James? And that was based from Ray Fran's
Freedom Book. Yeah,
so
it's about James, though, right?
Yeah, James.
And there's another one.
The second one is perverting Corinthians to prove Jehovah's Witnesses are the one true religion. One that we did.
Check them out, because these are very important when you're dialoguing with Jehovah's Witnesses, to get them to actually look at the text they quote. Well, quote. Sometimes they quote them. Here they don't. They refer to them.
Yeah.
But they're always using the same proof text. The 1
Mhm.
Corinthians 1:10
Yeah. And again, I recommend read the whole book of Ezekiel without flipping back and forth. Just read it straight through.
See you next time.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty long. Whoop. No.